Hello?
Hey Josh, it's Wes.
Hey, how's it going?
Good man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so very much for taking the time to do this interview.
No problem, looking forward to it.
Oh, awesome. Well, I've recently been able to check out your brand new album, A Way You'll Never Be, and I've been really digesting it a lot, and I really love the direction that you're going in this time around.
Oh, thanks man, that's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. So, what went into the songwriting this time around?
Well, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
I'll try to make it non-loaded, but...
No, so much went into it. Let me think about this for a second. How to put that? Well, more than anything was focus on and dialing in my vision. The last two albums, I'd had a co-writer and a producer, and they were good albums, and I was really proud of them. But I was heading in a direction, and he was heading in a different direction. And this album seemed to. I just kind of made a decision this album to really focus on what I wanted to hear and what I wanted to play, and that's kind of how this started. So about a year and a half when I started writing songs for this record, I would walk into the room that I was writing. I'd pick up my whatever guitar I felt like playing and started playing the music that I wanted to hear and the music that I would have the most fun playing, and that's kind of where that started to come out. Yeah. So it was really more of anything as a focus on my own vision.
And I really noticed that this time around because being a fan of what you've done in the past with all of your endeavors, and of course what you've done with your solo material as well, this one does definitely feel like you taking reins of everything that you wanted to do when it comes to your solo material.
Yeah, that really is the definition of what happened here. Every aspect of it. And also, I allowed myself the freedom. I mean, there were some times where I took some chances and did some things with the arrangements that, some artists or a lot of artists don't do. But I just was like, man, this is really what I want to hear there. This is really what I want to do, And so I just kind of followed the muse, so to speak, followed the vision. It didn't waver off of it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, did you feel any pressure that you had to stick to any kind of way, or was just that muse that's so strong to you that you didn't have to worry about it?
No, I didn't. There was no pressure anywhere. Even the label, in the initial talk with Thomas, who's the head of Inside Out, about direction for the album he even said, John, I kind of feel like you have a vision that, you didn't get to realize in the last record. Why don't you focus on that, And, the things that I love to play, I mean, I played all those years of Porcupine Tree, and when I played in Fish before that, I kind of brought a heavier element. And, I have the guitar side of me, which has always loved things like Rush and Pink Floyd and stuff like that. And then to be able to meld that with the singer-songwriter side of me, which goes really, really in depth in the lyrics, and to bring those two worlds together was kind of the goal. And I've been struggling with that for years, getting closer and closer and closer. And this was really the first record, the first set of songs where I felt those two worlds finally united and worked in a really cohesive way.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with that from the outside perspective as well, because, it's like, I loved it when you got heavy with Porcupine Tree, and I loved it when you were able to go a bit more melodic with Fish. But, with, like, A Way You'll Never Be, it does sound like you really melded those two together and just made it your own, and it's just a fantastic listen to go from start to finish.
Man, thank you so much. And that was the goal. That was definitely the goal, was to bring those two worlds together. Like I spent, on some of those songs, just in the lyrics alone, I would spend days, on them. So there's a lot of depth in all of the elements of the record.
And does any of that approach to, like, the song title, maybe I'm just looking a little too much into it, but, like, what you've done in the past with your solo material, is that anything to do with what the album title is?
Could you explain that to me again?
Well, like a side you'll never be, like you hadn't been able to get into more of that melodic and metal the way that you have this time around. I mean, was that like a reflection on the past at all, or am I just
No, that element is in there. The A Way You'll Never Be thing has a lot of layers to it, but definitely one of those layers is in my own life, allowing myself to be what I have never allowed myself to be, so that element is in there as well. It It's interesting you picked up on that, because there are many layers to that title and where all of that came from. And as I'm sitting there writing these lyrics and, weaving all the elements into that, becoming what you've never been able to become is part of that, of the deeper meaning of the whole track in the album.
And I was really hoping it had something to do with that as well, because that was definitely the vibe I was getting from it, not just musically, but of course lyrically as well. It's just like, I know a lot of people in the arts and myself, and always have those feelings of not being able to do what you fully want to do in fear of it failing, or just not. You risk that you won't be as happy in the end if you go that direction, and it's very relatable.
A lot of the themes for the record and the lyrics tie back to some Ernest Hemingway stuff. Actually, the title for the record comes out of one of his stories. And one of the things that Hemingway always struggled with was that same thing, was living up to his own hype, or living up to his own vision, his own dream. So that is definitely one of the elements weaved through it, was becoming that thing that you strive for.
Do you feel like you're there yet, or do you feel like you're on the way to get to that point?
I don't think you ever arrive at that point. I think that point is a path, and I'm definitely on the path now. I think the next record, the next set of songs will be different than these songs, will be even further down that path. But it's certainly not a destination. I used to treat it as a destination, and from being around guys like Fish and Steve Wilson that are constantly evolving, I realized that it isn't a destination. It's a path, and this record saw me firmly implanted in that path, if that makes any sense.
Oh, that totally makes sense. And actually, as you were saying that was kind of opening up my mind a little bit, is of not treating it like a destination, because I do that myself. I've always thought of that as a destination of, if I do this, then I'll finally be happy, rather than doing it the way that you were just talking about now, just going in that direction to make yourself happy.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a concept that you'll see woven through the whole record, and there's this realization that happens there in the last two verses of the last song, Pointless Endeavors, that wraps up the concept that you just talked about. That we chase this thing, we chase this destination our whole lives, never realizing that where we're at the moment was always the best place to be. You always aim to go somewhere, you always find yourself on a path, you're always looking forward. But I spent years looking so forward that I missed a lot of of the moments that I was in. And as a player, you wake up one morning, you have this goal. I want to be that guy. I want to be that good. And you chase that your whole life. And no matter how good you get, you're never going to be that good, because that bar keeps moving away from you. The better you get, the further that bar moves. So at one point, you've got to take a step back and go, there is no getting where I thought I was going to be. It's always what's happening now and where I am. And the playing I'm doing now is the player that I am. And it's not the player I'm going to be, but it's the player I am right now. And like I said, the song "Pointless Endeavors," and it does it on a broader scope. Those lyrics treat that not only from a playing or writing perspective, but from a life perspective as well. I think so many of us are chasing a destination, not to realize that destination is where you are at that moment.
Oh, that is such an amazing way to look at that. And as someone suffering through that right now, like going through that, I mean, that's really inspiring me just to hear you put it that way. And it's putting my mind into a different perspective of trying to reach it that way rather than the destination.
Yeah, and as a player, you have to. I meet a lot of guys that and this is now years later. Yep. I'm gonna gig soon. I'm almost there, man. I'm gonna take that bigger gig soon. I'm playing in this club now, and I'll play that next club. But as soon as I get there, as soon as I'm this or as soon as I'm that, it's like, well, once you're beyond basic competency, just jump in and do it. And chances are, and I'm the worst at it. I have, terrible confidence. But luckily for me, when opportunities were presented to me, or decisions were made, it's like I'm not going to wait to write the album until I'm that good. I'm just going to write it now. And, I think Steve said something that was amazing to me years ago. He looked at me playing, we were laughing one time, he watched a clip playing, I was playing with my band from the 80s, and he's like, oh, God, you guys are really good. I was like, what? He goes, well, yeah, I mean, for that time period and where you are right then and there, you were really good. And I thought to myself, and here I am now, and he's like, no one arrives fully formed. And so taking that on board allows you to forgive yourself those things that you did on the path to get where you are. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way that Stephen said it and the way that you're describing it as well, I mean, that is just a fantastic outreach to be able to get to that point and try to reach happiness that way. And, it's like, just like he said, you never arrive fully formed. It's things that you learn over a lifetime that shape you who you are. And when you are able to get that outside perspective of things you've done in the past, like from your work in the 80s, I mean, it's refreshing to hear that outside perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a huge moment for me because, I struggled, bringing two sides of my writing together for all those years. And I did some good records. This is my 8th record. Those last 7 records, are certainly building blocks to get here. There's some fantastic songs on all of those records, but it wasn't until the last 3 records that who I am and where I'm going really started to come together. And who knows, I'm not even there yet. Like, my view is what's next. It's not what am I doing or what have I done. It's what's next. And so again, it just removes that thought of destination. It's what's next on that path.
Yeah, and again, I just can't say it enough. I mean, that is such an inspiring way to look at it, and I definitely hear that lyrically and musically as well, just trying to find yourself and find that way to become happy with your life and head in that direction to maintain that happiness, rather than going to point A, point C to be able to just say that you're going to be happy and forever be happy, because that never does happen, but being able to maintain the happiness is important.
Yeah, or to be happy with yourself as a player or a writer, like, when I can do this, or when I'm as good as so-and-so, then I'll be there. Then, you got to lose that,
Yeah, it's an important thing, because that's another thing, too, is you can always take those inspirations from musicians or artists or whatever the case is who you feel are better than you, but use them to inspire you to create stuff that you can have for originality as well, because you don't want to become a carbon clone of somebody else. You want to be able to form your own sound.
Yeah, we all stand on the shoulders. I mean, even Steven will tell you that. I mean, when we all stand on the shoulders, and he'll be the first to admit it. And I learned from that as well. It's okay to stand on the shoulders and go to the next place. So you don't have to become your idols. Try and look beyond your idols and be yourself.
Yeah, and that's such an important way, and I'm glad that you've reached that point, especially with your solo material, where you are able to finalize the direction that you wanted to go with your music, and you'll be able to do that in a continuation down the road.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me. It's a great place to be in. There's still, not that I'm like super confident and I can go into the studio and everything's awesome. It's still a daily struggle. Every note, every word, it's still a struggle. But to at least have confidence that if you put in the work, if you sit down in that chair and you pick up that guitar, you pick up that pencil, and you put in the work, that something's going to happen. And that's the most important thing.
Oh, very much so. I mean, even if you never become fully happy with what you do in life, but as long as you're going in the right direction to maintain that happiness, again, that is the most important thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes in the record that tie back, that take a lot of the things that I see in modern life and around me and live to things that I learned from reading a lot of Hemingway. I read a lot of Hemingway through the years. Long story, but I played in Key West a lot, and he was always around us. If you live down there, it's an ever-present, he's on every t-shirt and every bar wall, But then when you start reading his writing and you start learning about how he lived his life and what the struggles that he went through on the same thing. Probably when he wrote the last sentence he ever wrote, he was firmly convinced he wasn't good enough and he was moving on to the next place. So I don't think that's something that ever disappears.
And yeah, I mean, I never hear that from people where they put out a product, whether it's an album or a painting or a company, where they finally reach that point and they say, I'm completely content now. I don't need to do anything more with my life. When you have that strive in life, you always want to try to better yourself.
Exactly. If you don't, then you're just not in it anymore, And it's funny because if you read a lot of Hemingway's stories, he'll rip on other writers that he felt had entered that place. When F. Scott started writing screenplays, Hemingway was merciless on him. It's like you've sold out to Hollywood. You've lost your, and a lot of things drove F. Scott to that. But Hemingway was merciless on that thing of giving up and saying, well, I've done this. Now I'm just going to do this. It's an interesting thing. So there's a lot. I learned a lot from reading and learning about him.
Yeah, and even though his life ended up in that sad way that it did end, you always can take positives from things like that, and in his writing and the way that someone lives their life.
Yeah, I mean, if you research the end of his life, the reason his life ended like that was because he lived it so fully. I mean, he'd had a couple of plane crashes. He actually used his head to bust out the windshield in a burning aircraft and pull everyone out through the windshield, and it did some damage. And I don't think what a lot of people realize is that at the end of his life, the very, very end, he could barely feed himself. He was a former shadow of himself, and so when he made that decision, you can look at it as a sad ending, or you can look at it as, well, he self-capped a great life. So he worked very hard to, it's that old thing, slide into your coffin used up. He most certainly did that,
Oh yeah, there's no question about that with everything that he's done in his life. I mean, if there was a way for him to go out like that, I mean, being able to go on your terms, I mean, it is a good cap.
Yeah, he was a mess. He was a physical, and he they'd done electric shock therapy to him. I didn't know all that. I was always like, oh my God, he committed suicide, blah, blah, blah. And then if you really do the research and you find out what condition he was in when he did, you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't really support that concept, but I get it. He was a mess.
Yeah, I mean, when you really do that research, especially from like the outside, I mean, it's a sad way to go to have to do that yourself. Yeah. But just like, even though that's not something I would ever do, I completely understand where he was coming from. Yeah.
And I think the example that you can get most from his life is the fact that he lived every damn day of it. And, he struggled with depression, vicious depression. And, I used to beat myself up for going long periods of time without writing because life would get in my way. I was raising kids, I was gigging, I was working, and I would go through long periods without writing, and then I would read about him as well. And he would go long periods without writing. He went years without doing things. But he would always manage to pull it back together and come back better than he was before. And that became kind of a goal for me. I use that as an example. I'm like, well, I may have been, taken away by life here, but I'm going to come back and be better and stronger than I was before. And I think this album is, for me anyway, personally, is kind of a consummation of that idea, that concept.
Yeah, and that's a great way to bring this whole conversation full circle because, with the career that you've had that I really admire, being able to play with some of the best and some of my favorite musicians of all time, and being able to reach this point with your brand new album, being able to reach that point to at least start having the confidence to write the music that you truly fully want to make. I mean, sometimes people never reach that point, and some people are able to do that from the beginning, but as long as you can hit that point and be able to continue on the rest of your life that way, it's just a great thing to see.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It's been a long term, it's been a long path, and I've had a great time getting here. I've played with some amazing people. I mean, you're, Josh, the drummer guy. Yeah. Think about all the drummers I've played with.
Oh yeah.
Or rode motorcycles and drank whiskey with. It's been a great path.
Yeah, it really has. And of course, with that life, there's always going to be trials and tribulations, a lot of lows and valleys, but it's those high moments that really do make it worth it, especially when you reach that point of confidence where you can go back and look at all of those great things you've done in life and really start to appreciate them.
Yeah, and that's the key to the whole thing, so, you take what you get and you do the best you can get and just keep working forward.
Oh, very much so. And just switching it a little bit and being able to continue with that, you got some amazing tours coming up at the end of the year.
I do. Get to go back out with my good buddies from Marillion, who were hugely instrumental in helping me along this path in the early days by giving me the breaks to be a part of their earlier tours. I've probably done over 350 shows with those guys, And to be able to do that again is fantastic. And then at the end of that, to be able to tie back in with Steve and finish up the touring run as he's finishing up his touring as well will be a blast, So that it's going to be a good run.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable timing, especially with the themes of the album, being able to go back and work with those musicians that you have in the past that really helped shape your career. Of course, with Marillion being a lot more melodic than, say, Porcupine Tree, but being able to explore both of those sides and then be able to fluctuate that with the brand new album, which really combines what you've done in the past and continuing on in the future.
Yeah. Together all within a 6-week period. It's kind of funny. It's kind of cool.
So, with that, do you feel like you need to change your sets at all between those two tours, or do you feel like you're going to be working on the same set?
I'll be solo on both tours, so I will actually roll from one right into the other, so the sets will be the same. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. And
very similar.
Yeah, and that's great to see that, too, that you are able to expose that to both types of audiences as well.
Yeah, and that's key to be able to bring that to both worlds, because I think even though there is some lapping over of audiences, I think they're both both separate enough that it gives me a real exposure to a wider fan base, if that makes any sense, a wider set of music fans.
Oh yeah, I mean, being a huge fan of Marillion and Steven Wilson, I hardly compare those two as being the same band because they have so many different elements that you can contrast, so being able to explore both of those sides, especially with your solo material, you definitely hear those different influences.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny that, you just made me think of something. Like, when I was learning to be a vocalist, I had just started singing maybe a year or two before my first set of Marillion gigs. Walking, I'll never forget, as long as I live, walking into the first rehearsal in Quebec, and I had never heard Steve Hogarth sing before. And he starts singing in rehearsal. I want to say the first track might have been 100 Nights, or no, Splintering Heart. And I was just like, what in God's name is this? How can anyone sing like that? And so for me, that's one side of my playing, and then the Porcupine Tree thing being another side of my playing, it's like, there's the combining of those two worlds on one tour, one set of touring is kind of a blast.
Oh yeah, very much so. And speaking of course, playing with Marillion and Porcupine Tree, do you ever still go back and listen to those albums that you were a part of, whether it was for touring or recording, or do you ever play any of those songs anymore?
You mean the Porcupine Tree stuff?
Well, that and Marillion, just like whether you're sitting at home, like, do you pick up the guitar and play those songs, or do you ever go back and listen to those albums?
There's definitely a couple favorites that'll just, if I'm goofing around, that'll appear under my hands. The Warm Wet Circles stuff was always one of my favorite guitar things to play when I was playing with Fish, and we started doing the one where circles, that whole Clutching at Straws medley. I've always loved that, and even when I was working with Marillion and hearing Steve Rotary play it every night. So every now and again, that one kind of pops out, and then every now and then I played 450 shows with Porcupine Tree, so those riffs come out every now and again as well. But it's just more or less goofing around, and something will drift back, if that makes sense, more than constantly choosing to go find it.
Oh yeah, and that's not what I meant either about just like forcing yourself to go back and play those, but just sometimes like messing around on the guitar. It's like, oh yeah, I remember going.
They come drifting back in for sure, because that was fun stuff to play. I really enjoyed all of that play.
Yeah. And whether you're able to ever go back and jam with them on stage again, or whether you're just sitting at home with an acoustic and just playing those, it's always fun to go back and reminisce to those times of music.
Oh, absolutely, I love it.
Oh, very much so. Well, what are your plans in 2017?
Well, I'm looking for more touring opportunities. I think the record needs to come out to open some doors. It's getting a lot of attention, and I need that attention to kind of creep into the fan base, to create a demand so that some of the promoters will start pitching some gigs and some touring, so that I can get out there and do some touring after the first of the year on my own. So I'm hoping to use the momentum from the other tours and the album release to kind of launch into the ability to do some solo touring.
And I hope with this interview we'll be able to help propel that even more, because I definitely would love to hear this in some kind of capacity within driving distance of me, living in Minnesota. I would definitely love to hear these songs live and just be able to experience how you're doing now in 2016 and 17.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a chance. I mean, it's a great band with Mark on drums and Sean on bass, and I'd love to be able to bring that to people. And I mean, I've always played guitar. When I was in Porcupine Tree, I was doing a certain thing. When I was touring with Big Elf, I was doing that thing. When I was playing with Fish, I was doing that thing. I'd really like to get out in front of those people and say, well, this is actually me. This is my thing, And more than anything, I think that's a goal that I have,
Yeah, and it's definitely one that I hope I can help with in this interview, just being able to help shine that light, because this album is definitely something that is deserving of all the praise that it's been getting so far. And when it finally does come out in October, I hope the listener will be able to sit down and experience that and just really appreciate everything that you're doing now.
I hope so, because I think if you take the journey on the record, there's, if you follow it musically and lyrically, it's a musical journey, it's a real journey through the whole thing. And just being able to share that with people is going to be amazing,
Oh, very much so. Well, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. This has been an absolute highlight for me to be able to talk to you and be able to promote the brand new album, which comes out in October through Inside Out Music. And this conversation has really lifted my spirits up in a way that I truly needed. And I hope someone listening to this, whether it's the YouTube version or the one that'll be on my radio show, they'll be able to appreciate it as much as I have been able to appreciate all of these positive ideas and trying to make your life better the way that you've been helping me through this conversation.
I hope so, Josh. I mean, I know you're a drummer, and believe me, I know what it's like sweating that path. But remember, it is a path, and you're just at one place along that road. Keep going.
Oh, very much so. Well, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you'd like to mention that I haven't brought up yet?
No, just the only thing I would do is just encourage people to take the journey. It's on the record, get in there. All the CD and the album version come with the lyrics. Sit down like you used to do when you were a kid, and you used to buy an old gatefold album and open it up and read through it and take the journey.
Yeah, again, that's just a great way to look at it. And again, when people are actually able to buy the album and check out the lyrics and experience that with the music, I think it's definitely going to have that positive approach with them.
Yeah, it was a big mission of mine, was to create that sensation that I used to get when I was a kid. And I used to go out and buy that album and sit down with it and close the door to the room and turn the speakers on and just go there. And that's what I kind of hope people will do with this.